So globally, we actually are less than 1% of the entire international building stock of them in zero carbon conditions operationally. And we actually need that rate to get up to 100%. But we also need to supplement that with not so much cutting edge technologies, but existing technologies and to promote their skill.
From an international perspective, at what stage is the global promotion of green and low carbon buildings currently?
Yeah, so globally, we actually have less than 1% of the entire international building stock of them in zero carbon conditions operationally. If we're looking at also accounting for the materials in the construction phase, the number is endless. And this is for existing. 5% is the rate for new buildings we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years. And we actually need that rate to get up to 100%. So as you can tell, the gap is massive. We really need to accelerate actions both on the operational and embodied side. And we really need to equip countries and local authorities and also the private sector, the industry, with the right tools, with the right incentives to mainstream of decarbonization in building stock. We see differences across regions and in our particular regulatory challenges, and then there are common challenges as well. And those common challenges are, the most interesting ones and the ones where we can really make a difference.
What notable differences exist in technological application and policy support across different regions, such as Europe, North America, and emerging markets?
Yeah, so in a lot of the emerging markets, we see that it's more of a data issues, data gaps, and understanding and benchmarking the existing building stock to begin with, and then being able to implement life cycle assessments and life cycle accounting for the full life cycle of buildings. That seems to be a major gap. There's fragmentation in sectors, the supply chain, and through to the developers and those making the decisions. So that is a big challenge also in terms of providing the right incentives from a regulatory perspective for new emerging markets. But as I mentioned, the challenges continue to be common around upfront costs that are high, that are also increasing the burden on those communities that cannot afford to make those investments into zero carbon buildings. For the more mature, more developed markets, it's still an affordability issue. It's a common thread. It is also a gap in capacity building and knowledge and skills. We still need to equip both the local authorities and the construction workers in green building practices.
Regarding the resilience equity in building decarbonization, what contradictions often arise in their practical advancement? For example, how to balance the cost of low-carbon retrofits with affordability for the general public?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question and continues to be a challenge. As mentioned, when we look into resilience, it is not only prudent, but it's paramount to invest in flood mitigation, in insulation, in heat adaptation measures for buildings. But adding on all of these additional layers or additional levels of support to buildings, of course, as a burden by the renters or the owners. And what we're seeing is that there is pressure on local governments to find solutions to increase the affordability of those already available technological solutions in terms of insulation and flood risk protection, but also to look into ways to bring in the private sector to take on the risk sharing here for investment in these. We see examples from places like New York with their local law 97, where they're looking into still maintaining high standard of decarbonization. So there are still carbon caps for most buildings, but there are certain exceptions and incentives and subsidy form incentives provided to the social housing and those that cannot afford to make decarbonization a reality as quickly and as cheaply as others.
What are the pain points in financing global green and low carbon buildings project currently? In response to these pain points, what innovative financial models have you observed that have been proven effective in practice?
The main pain points continue to be the perceived risks for investment from financiers. There still doesn't seem to be the desired return on investment as well, on making those either retrofit renovation investments or creating new buildings that are zero carbon from scratch. And that is, in a way, a type of market failure where we're looking into ways to plug in that gap through blended finance and de-risking mechanisms. But there's also additional, as I mentioned, regulatory and policy challenges, and those continue to provide barriers to scale. So it has to be a concerted effort, both from the public sector to provide the right frameworks and the right guidance on why the investments need to flow in a certain way. So either provide financial tools, innovation. It is something that may already exist in the market, but may not have been applied directly to the building sector, for example. So lowering the costs to the consumer, addressing split incentives. So all of those tools do exist in the market, but they are not enough on their own. So we're looking into ways to combine them. So we can combine a green bond with an additional incentive for lowering, for example, the risk rate for an investor, or having guarantees in place. And the payback period might be slightly longer for some of these investments, but there's still a guarantee in place that.
Looking ahead to the next 5 to 10 years, what technologies or financial tools do you believe will become key drivers for the green and low carbon buildings? What plans does WRI have in these areas?
So in terms of technologies, we actually see quite a bit of interest around building passports and some smart home technology systems. And I think that is a really great way to continue to keep track of consumption, to incentivize behavioral change. But we also need to supplement that with not so much cutting-edge technologies, but existing technologies, and to promote their scale. So the existing technologies, such as we have carbon concrete, that needs to become more mainstream and find the right incentives in the market to ensure there is demand for it. And then the supply of orders will follow in terms of the scale that is needed. But as I mentioned, there are also other cooling technologies that are more on the passive side, that don't require the energy that mechanical cooling will require. But coupled with mechanical cooling can really achieve the impact to address the extreme heat we continue to experience, both in terms of intensity, but also frequency and duration.